Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu Al-Samad.
So we're up to episode 39, so nearly a momentous number because round numbers and things.
Whatever.
Sure. And
arbitrarily momentous.
Right. Well, that's we as humans just ascribe meaning to things that are meaningless.
We tend to do that.
Yeah, we're really good at it.
And we'll talk a little bit more about ascribing meaning to meaningless stuff a little later on in the show when we talk about the head guy at the Genesis brand.
Yeah, I found a lot of meaning in his words. I did not think they were meaningless.
Well, I think his words were more meaningful than the things he was talking about.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Unless you're talking about profitability, and then they probably are meaningful. We'll get there. Yeah. In the meantime, let's talk about what we've been driving. Both of us were lucky enough to spend a week with the Ford F-150 Raptor. So
fine, lucky.
Well, I mean, it's a hell of a truck in some ways, and I will.
In some ways, yes.
So I dropped my son off at school earlier this week with it, and the teachers, like, I had no idea women in their 50s. I think I'll be generous. I'll say women in their 40s were so into badass trucks. Like, I dropped my son off. Actually, I dropped both kids off. So there's like two different drop-off locations. Nobody cares this much about my life. So I dropped my son off first, and the teacher's like, "Wow, that is a fancy truck. Is this new?" And I was like, "No, I always give the half-assed explanation, like it belongs to Ford and whatever." Oh, do you write reviews? And then you have to explain that, like, yes, that's what I do. And then so now you're doomed for the next however many months to be talking about that with them. And so I go to drop my daughter off, and like the head of the school is there, and she's like, that's an awesome truck. And I had to go through the whole spiel again.
It certainly has presence.
It absolutely does. And it was, so the one that I had was black, and it had, just kind of subtle graphics on the bed and the wheels that look like bead locks. And I mean, it definitely stood out.
The one I drove was the pale gray, which they've actually dropped that color for a 2018 model year, which I think is actually fine because I didn't find it a particularly appealing color. You
didn't like it?
Well, I thought it was just kind of boring. I mean, given the nature of this truck, I just thought it was kind of a dull color. I think some of the more vibrant colors are more interesting on this truck.
It's definitely got the sculpted body surfaces to really play with light. I mean, all the front body work is all special to this truck, and it's muscular, and it just, yeah. And in a color that really stands out. The black, it looked good, but, yeah, I think globally, all auto companies are really like chromophobic. They just don't like colors. You look back in the day, even the 80s, right, when horsepower sucked and everything was terrible. At least there was color and stripe packages.
Well, actually, it's not really the car companies; it's the customers. Because they offer most vehicles with at least a couple of more vibrant color options, usually some kind of bright red or, some sort of red, occasionally, in some sportier vehicles, some sort of green, bright green or something like that, or, a blue. But the most popular colors they sell are, the black, the silver, and the white.
Yeah,
those are the ones that customers are buying for some inexplicable reason, and as a result, they that's what the manufacturers build because that's what the demand is.
So, well, here's the thing, though: is it truly people making those choices, or can we blame dealers because it's so much fun to blame dealers?
Actually, you're probably right, because the vast majority in this, in the U.S., the vast majority of vehicles get sold from dealer inventory. People go in and they want to have a car now or in the next couple of days, and so they usually end up getting something from inventory,
right?
And the dealers will pick the colors that they think they're going to be able to turn the fastest, because they don't want to have cars sitting on the lot for extended periods of time, and so they go for those monochromatic shades, which is unfortunate.
Right. No, but it's a completely sensible business decision. I mean, I remember again back in the 90s, one of my parents' colleagues, he bought himself a brand new MN12 Thunderbird. Beautiful car. It had it either had the Windsor or the modular V8 in it. Lovely car. The problem with it, and he got a fantastic deal. The reason why he got a fantastic deal was that it had sat on the lot for a very long time, because it was this like metallic, pearlescent, purplish color. It had an ugly color on it.
I remember that color.
Yeah. So it was like metallic purple, and then it had like pearl in the clear, or like blue tinted clear. So it had a look. I mean, in the right light, it wasn't bad, but it just was kind of ugly. But he didn't care. It drove well, and he got a really good deal on it, because it was pretty much bolted to the floor. And so like I can understand from a dealer perspective, but man, I really wish you could get yourself some just different colors. I mean, I'm okay with the reds and the blues. I mean, we almost bought a silver Grand Cherokee, and I was using it as a tactic to like get out of there without purchasing. I was like, no, we want to hold out for a red one. Oh, we've got a red one. Crap.
Well, when my wife and I were buying our Civic last spring, we really wanted to get the Aegean blue, which is a really gorgeous shade of blue, but we could not get one with the Honda sensing package on it, in that color. And almost all the ones they had were, the black, silver, or white. And we finally we've managed to find a red one. They got a red one in, and so we went with that one. But it was nuts trying to find a blue one.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm resigned. The next time I actually want to configure something exactly where I want, I'm gonna have to special order it, because like they'll do red with black interior. I don't like black interiors. I'm stuck with that now. Red with a tan interior is one of my favorites. Yeah,
well, most of the cars that I've bought for myself over the years, I have special ordered. But as it's turned out, the up until this one, for my wife's cars, the colors that she wanted happened to be the ones that they had in stock, and so we did that. But this was the first time when we really wanted to get something different and could not find it. And Honda is not great about, at least here in North America, about doing special orders unless you're buying an NSX, in which case they're pretty much all special order.
I mean, I think if it were me at that point, I'd be like trying to draw on my connections and be like, look, guys.
And you know what? I actually did that.
It's probably useless.
And there literally was not a car in the color we wanted with the trim level and options that we wanted anywhere to be found in the Midwest. Anywhere.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's one of the ways that they maintain profitability. It's just sort of like quietly, like.
Well, I mean, that is one of the things that not just Honda, but most of the import brands, import. Given that most of the cars are built here, but
import built in. Well, it's imported from Ohio.
Yeah, the non-domestic brands. Well, actually, sure. In the case of the Civic hatchback, it is actually built in the UK, although the powertrain's built in Ohio. But that's another story. But Toyota, Honda, Nissan, the Koreans, typically what they do is, they have a very limited set of configurations that you can get. They'll have maybe three or four trim levels, and a couple of packages that you can pick from, and then a half a dozen colors, and that's basically it. So the total number of build combinations is usually in the dozens, or less than 100, as opposed to like if you went through all the possible build combinations for an F-150.
Oh well, I mean that's that. Yeah,
it's in the I know I'm not sure what it is right now, but at one point a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago, it came out to like 14 million possible build combinations.
Yeah, well, and that's possibly the most extreme example within the Ford lineup, just because that the truck is,
because you do have multiple body styles. You have 3 different cabs, a couple of different bed lengths, and all the different variation. 4 different power engines, and front wheel drive or rear wheel drive or 4-wheel drive. So you're right. It's an extreme case, but even for the regular for cars or utilities, the number of build combinations still is typically in the hundreds of thousands and often upwards of 1 million.
Yeah, I mean, the Mini is the best example. They put it right on the site. Like when you go to configure one of the vehicles, it says like loading X amount of million possible combinations. So anyway, let's pivot back to the Raptor,
the truck,
which is a terrible truck. It's an awful truck. It's completely useless. It has a 1,000-pound payload and a 6,000-pound tow rating.
Yeah, I mean, it in a lot of ways, it's funny, because the Raptor is developed by the Ford Performance Division, and in many ways, it is the Ford GT for the off-road set. If you plan to go off-road racing, or running through the dunes, this is a great truck.
Yeah,
if you want something to actually use as a truck, it's probably the worst possible F-150 you can get.
Oh yeah, it definitely is, because honestly the work aspect of it is most really much more wimpy cars are going to put it to shame. But it is brilliant at that one thing that it's designed to do, which is like pre-running for score races like the Baja 1000. If you want to go pre-run the course, you can see when you,
or even just race, a roll cage in it and you're good to go pretty much.
I really was like trying to figure out a way I could go give this thing a pummeling off-road, and I didn't manage to. It's tough out here in Massachusetts. It's kind of illegal to go off-road in public spaces. They don't like it when you go up along the high-tension power lines. I don't want to get stuck in there. That's very expensive to get out, and probably also some kind of trespassing citation.
There are places in Michigan where you can do it, although I didn't. But there's some areas not far from here where there's some gravel roads that, particularly after some heavy rains, you get some pretty horrendous potholes and bumps in there until they get graded again. And I did run this thing over those, at a fairly good pace. And the suspension just soaks them up. I mean, it doesn't care. I mean, you can run this thing over just about anything without a problem.
Yeah, it definitely the frame, because this is the second generation Raptor now, so it gets the benefit of all that re-engineering of the latest F-150. The frame is more rigid than it had been. The suspension is fantastic. You can tell that that's where the money is, because inside it's kind of like the same F-150 you'd buy for something like $30,000 instead of $65,000. But you look under there, you've got Fox remote reservoir dampers. You've got the BFG K02 tires on the wheels that are sort of beadlock-ish. I don't know if they were beadlock capable.
I'm not sure about the current one. I know on the previous gen Raptor they did offer beadlock wheels as an option.
Yeah.
And so I think they do have that as an option on the new ones as well.
Yeah, they at least paid homage to the idea that you would have that. I mean, and it's a serious piece of hardware, and it definitely drives with some authority. It's softer.
Just until you get back on pavement.
Well, even on pavement, like it still handles pretty well. It'd be easy to get it loose and get yourself in trouble for sure. It's got a lot of power. It's got a lot of compliance because
especially in those tires.
Yeah,
I mean, it's by modern standards, it's kind of weird to actually go around a corner, at a fairly brisk pace in this thing, because it rolls quite a bit. And, those tall sidewall tires, I mean, in modern vehicles, you're so used to driving, on cars with these, really short sidewalls with no compliance. And, this thing, I mean, you can feel those big tires rolling under as you go around a corner.
Yeah, it's nice and pillowy.
Yeah. Speaking of leisurely, transmission.
Really? You didn't like the 10-speed? I thought the 10-speed was pretty good.
Well, I mean, it's smooth. It's smooth shifting. But, the funny thing is they put, on the Raptor, you get paddle shifters.
Oh, I didn't use those.
Well,
I never do.
They're pretty pointless. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I think if you're going off-road, and crawling around in a canyon or, going over rocks, boulders and things like that, it actually probably would be useful, for, shifting, especially if you're running, in low gears, put on, go to, four-wheel drive low and, lock the center diff and, going around in the first 2 or 3 gears, it would be useful for that. But I mean, usually when you think of paddle shifters, you think about, wanting to snap off some couple of quick downshifts, to accelerate. And, you tap those paddles in this thing and you count and, oh yeah, you wanted me to shift? Oh, okay, no problem. I'll shift now. It was the most leisurely shifting transmission I have tried in a long, long time.
Well, and see, that's why I never use the manual controls, because that's usually what I get from it. It just aggravates me. Left to its own devices, it wasn't bad. I in terms of sort of one of my biggest sort of testing points for transmissions and just drivetrain calibration is how eagerly I will get a downshift. And left in drive, this thing seemed to just it would drop from 10th to 9th to 8th pretty quickly. And there wasn't much of a delay, so it's not like I'm trying to plan in traffic and the car's just not doing what I'm asking for, and then all of a sudden it drops down like 3 gears and off we go for the red line, and then the moment has passed. This was better than that. I was impressed with sort of, and maybe it's because it has more ratios to choose from. It can make that drop a lot quicker. I don't know, whatever it was, it seemed a little better to me from behind the wheel. So maybe it's. I think as you said, left to its own devices, I think it actually tends to respond a little quicker than it does, or it seemed to respond quicker than if you actually tried to force it, and, if you're driving along and going along in 8th and you give it a couple of downshift taps and, and hope for 6th, and then you wait before something happens. Yeah. It just makes you sad. What did you think of this? Like the size of some of the steering wheel is real thick. The shifter is like a soda can.
Yeah, it's weird.
Comical.
It seems weirdly out of place in this thing, which is kind of which is why I described it as kind of like the Ford GT for the off-road set, because it's the engine is related to the one in the GT. It's a 3.5 liter EcoBoost, higher performance version than what you get in the standard F-150s. In the Raptor, it's 450 horsepower and 510 foot-pounds of torque, and in the GT, it's like 600 and something. But it's the same. It's using a lot of the same bits and pieces that you'll find in the GT engine.
Yeah, I have absolutely no complaints about the engine. It's phenomenal.
And the 3.5 the EcoBoost always has been a great engine.
And it sounds great with the sort of like I'm a jerk truck exhaust on it. It just has a great engine note.
Yeah, with the big dual exhaust, those two big pipes coming out of the rear bumper. And
it has 410 final drive on it, so it is pretty sprightly. Although there's a lot of truck here, and
this is not. Despite having an aluminum body, this is not what I would call a lightweight vehicle. It does not epitomize lightweight the way the GT does.
No, and still the things that have always bugged me about the F-150 still suck here too, like the clamshell doors. Because I didn't have the 4-door.
The Super Cab?
I did.
Through?
It's still awful. They sort of, at highway speeds, it just, I don't know, it just feels like the door's wobbling, or I don't know. It feels weak to me. I don't like that whole, like, the whole side of the cab is actually a door, and they just, like, you close it and you watch everything flex a bit, and maybe it's.
I've never really had that problem with those doors.
Yeah,
mine was also a super cab, not the crew cab. And I didn't notice any issues, with the doors feeling wobbly or anything like that.
It was either like the door vibrating against the seal, or it was like the seat belt and the seat, like just something squeaking. I couldn't tell exactly what was over my shoulder, my left shoulder, but it was like something you could hear. It was very subtle, but I was like, is this the cab configuration doing that or what? So, and that's just like been a consistent F-150 thing forever, is that the clamshell door system, just to me, it doesn't feel solid. And that's probably just my bias, because they seem to pass crash tests without a problem. So, yeah,
I mean, and GM uses them too. Chrysler doesn't anymore. The Rams have shorter front hinge doors, but GM still uses the clamshell design.
Yeah, well, the Rams are like. I like the Rams, but man, that's a truck that just feels like it was poured out of an ingot of cast iron. It's so heavy.
Yeah.
The aluminum body, it's interesting. It doesn't like when you open the hood and stuff, you're looking at it, you're like, is this plastic or what? And then you realize, like, oh yeah, it's aluminum. Overall, it's a pretty decent truck. I was not impressed with the interior quality for $65,000, but again, the money's not in the interior. The seats were nice and it was pretty quiet and for the most part, but the money went into the performance, which is like not damning with faint praise either. It's saying like it's not a real good truck in a work truck sense, but it's a great truck in an off-road sports truck sense, and it's actually probably a bargain when you consider what you get.
Yeah, well, it's interesting how the idea of the sport truck has evolved over the last 20 years. Like in the early 90s, Ford introduced its first performance version of the F-150 with the Lightning. Yeah, and then at the same time, you had trucks like the Chevy 454 SS, and later in the 90s, they did an SRT Ram with the Viper engine in it, the V10 Viper engine, and you also had some of the
Cyclone,
like the GMC Cyclone.
Oh, the Cyclone! I don't know how they managed to build that thing. That was like a fever dream.
Right, but I mean, the thing about all those is, they were designed as street trucks with high performance engines in them. And, they all had some limited appeal, but none of them really lasted very long. I mean, there was a second generation Lightning, but then, that got, none of them ever really sold all that well. And it wasn't until Ford introduced the Raptor, and decided to go a totally different direction with, a high output engine mated with a serious off-road chassis that, they seem to have finally hit on the right formula. And, and these things are, sell like crazy. I mean, compared to overall F-150 sales, they're a tiny percentage, but they're a very, very profitable percentage for Ford.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. I wonder how many of them are just commuter trucks,
I'm sure the vast majority of them are.
It's fine. Like, I wouldn't want to commute in it. It gets to be kind of tedious after a while. It's entertaining because you can ride up on somebody and they see just like this giant Ford emblem in their mirror, and they generally move over. So I can see that kind of appeal, but it's not. I don't know. I guess, what did you love about it?
The engine. That's about it. Really.
Wow, that was a long pause.
I mean, for what this thing is designed to do, it's great. But I'm not interested in what this thing is designed to do. It's not. This is not a vehicle for me. I mean, if you're interested in a really very visually out there truck that is capable of going just about anywhere, then this is a great truck. I mean, it does what it's intended to do very well. It's just that I personally have no interest in what it's intended to do.
Yeah, but so that's one of the things that I do love about it. I mean, I really liked the turgid looks and the singularity of purpose. Because the stuff I don't like about the F-150 hasn't been messed with because it wasn't important to the mission of the truck. Like because it's not the crew cab, there's actually not that much space in the cab. It gets kind of tight when you try to use the rear seat. It's not as terrible as the old jump seat cabs used to be, but still, I was using it as a sort of family vehicle to a degree. I was wishing for the crew cab and the extra space.
And you actually can get the crew cab, the Raptor as a crew cab as well. So I mean, for customers that want that is an option that's available. Right.
That just. Again, that just makes it less Raptor-y.
The 5.5 foot bed, is obviously limiting,
right?
And because of the way the suspension is set up, towing, even though it's got lots of power, the towing capacity and the payload capacity are also limited because of the suspension setup.
Right, and I also found it impossible to park because it's wide, the tires stick out. I'm glad that it had the camera set up because, I think that's an option.
But it is. The full surround view setup.
Yeah, it's really handy. If you're going to get a Raptor, get that. Because you can turn it on and get yourself into a parking space.
Yeah, well, especially the front camera.
Yeah.
Being able to see exactly where the front end of that thing is.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a fun truck that you shouldn't ever expect any work out of. But if you have the desire and the occasion to go tearing around where the roads are not paved, it's a fine choice for that.
Yeah, I mean, if you live in northern Wisconsin or Minnesota or somewhere out in Montana in the middle of winter, I'm sure this thing you will never get stuck in your home on a snow day. In those places with one of these things,
you'll get stuck somewhere out where the wolves eat you. All right, so you were driving something else too, though.
Yeah, after I had the Raptor, I traded that in for the Hyundai Elantra Sport, which you drove a few weeks back, and I still really like the Elantra. And did you have the manual transmission or the DCT?
I had the manual, which was pretty good, not great, but I thought it was numb, both the shifter and the steering.
Yeah, and I had the same feeling when I drove the Elantra GT a couple of weeks ago. This one, with the automatic, they tune the steering differently, and it's definitely got better steering feel than the manual does. And you get with the automatic, you get drive mode selection, so you can select between normal and sport mode, which tightens things up a little more. But oddly, I mean, the transmission shifts really smoothly and actually shifts really quickly. If you use it's got paddle shifters, and the transmission is very responsive. It's a dual clutch transmission, 7-speed. And this is a great transmission, but off the line, this one felt surprisingly weak. It didn't feel. You didn't have real brisk launch feel from this thing, which seemed kind of odd compared to the other cars I've driven with this 201 horsepower version of the 1.6 liter turbo. In the Kia Forte SX, it's got the same engine, but it has a 6-speed manual. Or at least the one I drove about a year and a half ago had a 6-speed manual, and I found that one a lot more fun. And even in the Elantra GT I drove a few weeks back, I found it more fun with the manual transmission, even though the transmission shift feel was smooth in that one, but it felt almost too light, and so you didn't really have great feel for what was going on.
Yeah,
but I still think I would have taken that one over the DCT in this particular combination.
Yeah, I wonder if that's something like they limit the torque in the first couple of gears just to.
I think that is the case, because it definitely did not feel as strong as it did in the Elantra GT, which is the same engine.
Yeah,
but it just didn't off the line. It just did not seem to respond quite as well.
Yeah, and that's a engine that feels a little light off the line, even with the manual. It needs to build up a little bit of head of steam first, a little bit of boost. So it's kind of soft with the manual off the line anyway. So with the DCT, I guess if it's torque limited, so you're not blowing up clutches and all those things when it's down in those lower gears, it can be even more disappointing. I wish they offered the drive modes though on all models.
Yeah, they for some reason they don't with the manual transmission. You only get that with the automatic. But aside from that, I like the car a lot. I mean, it's a fun little car. It's, I think it's, for me, personally, I think it's a great size. It feels fairly nimble. The handling's good. The ride, it's got a good combination of ride and handling qualities. In the Elantra sedan, the materials in the cabin don't feel quite as polished as in the GT. The Elantra GT definitely has a more upscale feel to the interior, but it's a completely different interior as well. And the materials in that one feel a little more premium than they do in this sedan. But when this sedan gets redone again in a couple of years, it's going to get something that's closer to what's in the hatchback as well.
See, but the thing is too, I didn't find the interior materials objectionable at all. I thought they were actually pretty good. Low luster plastics and just generally everything you touched felt pretty good for a new car. I don't know how it holds up, but for a new car, it felt right in there with the rest of the class.
Yeah, well, I mean, Hyundai and Kia both, have been doing great on, on the JD Power surveys, both the initial quality and the long-term durability surveys in the last couple of years. So, from everything I've heard, I think it should hold up pretty well.
Did you find that did it take you like a day or two to fully get it? Because I found with this car, with the Elantra Sport, it was good for the first couple of days, and then I figured out if I just wring its neck, then it comes alive a little bit more, and you get the more rewarding handling because it handles pretty well. It'll actually rotate. It can be entertaining to drive, but you have to actually drive it pretty aggressively to really get it to show those traits. Otherwise, it's just like, yep, it's an Elantra,
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, driven sedately, it feels like pretty much like any other, like an Elantra Limited or better, a little better than the Eco, which has smaller, lower rolling resistance tires on it. But, you're right. You do have to thrash it a little more to really get the most out of it.
And I'm not complaining because it was decent to thrash. So.
Yes, absolutely. And it, it's also quite reasonably priced. So.
Yeah, so that's the thing.
You can get one in the mid-20s. So.
Right. My take was like, I wrote it up for Forbes a couple of weeks ago, and it was, I was asked by people who knew that I had it. They were like, "What is that?" And so it's a sportier Elantra. Think of it like a GTI. Okay, well, what do you think? Well, it's no GTI, But also, it's like $4,000 cheaper than a GTI, and like fully equipped, it's a pretty significant gap. It's even more, $5,000 to $6,000 cheaper than a GTI, which can push into the 30s pretty easily. This is the one I drove. I think topped out at like 25, maybe, and it did not have anything left to add, I believe.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. And I think for about 26, you can get a pretty nice one. So,
yeah.
All right. Let's move on.
We had the same thought at the same time. Awesome. All right. Well, what do we want to talk about first? We've got a couple of things on the list that we can check off. What's the most interesting to you, Sam?
Oh, let's see. Why don't we start with Volvo?
Okay.
All right.
All right, you go ahead. You tee it up. So, I'll just offer color commentary.
So Volvo launched the new XC40 today in Europe, which is their their first compact crossovers, their third crossover in their lineup, joining the XC90 and the XC60, and this is the first model off of their second platform, their new compact modular architecture, which they're sharing that platform with some of the other brands in the Geely group. Geely being the Chinese company that happens to own Volvo now, and this is the first vehicle off that platform. It's a front wheel drive, front wheel drive and all wheel drive, transverse, architecture, like pretty much everything else in that size class. Designed to go up against the likes of the Audi Q3 and the BMW X3 and so on. It's a pretty cool looking little utility. I mean, it's a little bit of different design for Volvo. It's got some of the cues that we found in the other new Volvos recently, especially in the headlights. But what do you think of the shape of this thing?
Well, so my Twitter has been lit up today with people saying, "Gosh, that's a nice looking car," and it definitely gets your attention. And I do think overall, I think I agree. I think it's good looking. It's definitely distinctive. But every time I see it, I have to remind myself that it's not a Jeep Compass.
It does share some resemblance to the Compass, especially with the fact that, as far as I know, in all configurations of this thing, it's going to have a contrasting roof color.
Right, and that was one of the big things about the Compass, that they did that on purpose. They were especially proud of it. And it looks good. And you can only get so small with a CUV. The proportions are going to be same across all automakers once you get to a certain point, right? And so proportionally, it's probably about the same as a Compass as well. But I'm not sure what to make of it. Beyond that, it looks good. The interior, I was sad to see, has too few buttons and lots of screen, but I would expect it's going to be the typical beautiful Volvo materials, and everything is nicely designed. And I actually love how Volvo has reinvented itself for the first time in about 15 or 20 years. The last time there was this big reinvention was when the S80, the original S80, came out.
Right.
And that sort of design ethic took a while to work through a couple of generations. And we're seeing the tail end of that now. And it really worked. If you looked back at the Volvo portfolio from the early 2000s, you had the XC90, you had the S80, you had the S60, the V70, and the XC70. They all looked like they belonged. Even the S40, not the original one, the second generation. They all look like they belong together, and that's what they've done now. And they've evolved their language. The new XC90 set the tone, and all of the cars are sort of following in line. And I love that they've done that. They've moved beyond retro. They've moved beyond what was done by, was it Peter Horbury? Yeah. And so that's really exciting to see. I'm less keen on maybe the vehicle until I actually get my hands on it, just to see what it's going to be. My initial reaction is looks like visibility to the rear sucks.
Those C-pillars look a little thick.
Yeah. And Volvo's trying really hard to define their next move, their niche, because they're such a small automaker and they need to ensure survival. So the new, it's not, what is it, Care? Or what are they calling it?
Care by Volvo. So
right.
So this is one of the interesting things that they're launching with the XC40, and it'll eventually spread to the rest of the lineup as well. And I just heard back from Russell Datz, communications manager at Volvo North America, and they will be offering Care by Volvo here in the U.S. as well, and they're going to announce pricing at the LA Auto Show in November. But what what they're doing here is basically it's a subscription model for buying this car. So if you're at all familiar with the Apple iPhone upgrade program that they launched a couple of years ago, this is kind of like that, but for a car. So with the iPhone program, the iPhone upgrade program, if you signed up for that, you got a new iPhone, and you paid a flat monthly fee for that, and after 12 months you could upgrade to the next. Just turn in your phone and get the next one, and basically just keep paying and keep getting a new one every 12 months, or whenever you decided you wanted another one. And in this case here, for the XC40 and presumably for other ones as well, other Volvo models, that flat monthly fee is going to include insurance and service, so all the maintenance is going to be included in that. And at the end of 12 months, you can either keep driving the same one, or at that point, you have the option of getting a new one, turning it in and getting a new one.
They're going to have to explain that really carefully, because the cost of it in Europe is 699 euros, which is like 800 something dollars right now at the exchange rate. That's high. But then when you calculate the fact that includes everything like insurance and maintenance, it's actually probably not that high.
And depending on which market it is, in some markets it's also even going to include, I think, fuel, and you'll have the option of e-commerce deliveries, so you can have your Amazon packages delivered direct to the trunk of your car. Which is something that some companies have already been experimenting with in Europe for a couple of years now. And one of the other features that comes with that this includes is the ability to share your car with trusted friends and family. And I believe that they're using a system like what I saw demoed a few months ago at Continental. Where it's actually using your phone, using a smartphone and Bluetooth LE, and so when you give somebody access to your car, what it does is it'll send a token to that person's phone, an authentication token, and then when you walk up to the car, the car will unlock and start using your phone as the key.
Oh man, that's going to be so good when thieves start spoofing those tokens. That's going to be the first to go.
It depends. Depending on how they do it, it can be fairly secure.
I say that sarcastically.
Yeah, but clearly, that is going to be another potential attack surface for hackers to be able to get into these things and do something nefarious. So, hopefully, Volvo will implement it correctly, and not use any music majors on their cybersecurity team.
Hey, Volvo tends to be pretty careful and at least thoughtful, and they work with good suppliers. They'll figure it out. And there's,
I would, if they're using the Continental system on this thing, which I wouldn't be surprised if they are. From what I saw from that, it's implemented pretty well, and it should be reasonably secure.
Yeah, and there's no progress without pain, right? And they've got a balance, right? The friction between absolute security and nope, we're not going to offer that because it's a security problem, and new feature to talk about that differentiates them, and it's not that expensive for them to implement, and you know what I'm saying, that's something that it's a convenience feature, and those are the things that sell cars now, is the tech. I do think they're being kind of aggressive about how many they think they're going to sell. They have a goal of selling about 100,000 next year, and then 120,000 the following year. I hope that's a global number and not.
I'm sure that is, because they only sold a little over 500,000 vehicles total globally last year.
Right.
So 100,000 globally is not an unreasonable number for a vehicle like this, especially given the way the current market trends are towards utilities.
Yeah, because the currently their entire volume in the U.S. is only 50,000 or so. they may end the year at like 53 or 54 in the US. So like to see 100,000 of a single model, because that's all models. I guess they're more popular in other markets than I thought, which must account for the difference.
Well, I mean, Volvo has gotten some pretty good traction in China over the last several years. I mean, they've had a lot of growth in China in the last 5 years. So I wouldn't be surprised if a significant chunk of that 100,000 gets sold over there.
I mean, if you're looking to build up your volume, and you're in markets like China that are developing, they're big, potentially bigger, and they have an appetite for it. But also their economy is not quite as booming in that sense as it was a couple of years ago. It makes sense to slot in a model that fits in with the aspirational brand, but still is maybe a little bit more achievable. All of those things, good play. I'm sure they have thought about all this stuff. They don't need me to validate. But
well. I mean, to give you an example of what's possible with some premium SUVs, I mean, all we got to do is look at the next one on our rundown, which is Jaguar, and look at the success that they've had since they launched the F-Pace last year.
Well, and the F-Pace, that vehicle has, I think, made a stir wherever it's gone, and they're another maker that they've managed to evolve themselves, because Jaguar for years was just like this stodgy retro brand that made entertaining cars, but they were built like they had been for 40 years, or they looked like they had for 40 years. Either way, and then the XF, the original XF, sort of kicked it off. It was like this reimagination of the S-Type, and that car represented a huge shift for Jaguar. I
mean, that was that was the beginning of a whole new design language for the Jaguar brand.
Yeah, and look how successful it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's done great. I mean, and last year, 2016, Jaguar more than doubled their sales with the addition of the XE and especially the XF to their lineup. As a brand, they went from in 2016 they went from 14,500 cars in 2015 to over 31,000 in 2016.
That's in the U.S.
And that's just in the U.S.
Yeah.
And they're up, even more than that this year. And a lot of that, like one third. Last year, the XF launched, in the middle of the year, I think, around May or June of last year. And, they sold 10,000 of them in about, 7 or 8 months. And through August of this year, they've sold 14,000. So, that's an example of what you can get if you, add a utility, and do it right, and have it be something that fits your brand. And appeals to customers. The F-Pace, is a great performance SUV. I mean, it's not an off-roader by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I mean, but none of them go off-road.
No, that's that's true. Porsche, really kind of kicked this off with the Cayenne. And then, they've since added the Macan, and, everybody else has been going down this path with higher performance, luxury SUVs. All the German brands are doing it now. We haven't really seen it. I was talking with some folks today earlier today, I was at this Jaguar event here in Detroit. And I was talking with some other media, and we were talking about, why Cadillac and Lincoln really haven't competed at all in this segment. I mean, none of the, Lincoln's done okay with the MKC, the MKX, and the Navigator, but they're, they haven't really got anything that competes against something like the F-Pace, and neither does Cadillac. The XT5, is a really nice midsize crossover, but it's not even close to what these things are capable of doing. There's really no performance variant at all.
Well, but so that's the thing. Cadillac got burned a bit trying that, and Lincoln, I don't know what they're doing at Lincoln.
Yeah.
Because the MKs,
Lincoln's taking a different path.
Yeah.
They've decided on this this quiet luxury approach. They don't want. They're not trying to go performance with any of their vehicles.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. And their vehicle, like it's not that they don't perform; they're adequate. Like especially the vehicles with the Nano or the larger V6.
That 3-liter twin turbo V6, 400 horsepower. There's plenty of performance there, but they're not emphasizing that. They're not. That's not.
Yeah.
It's effortless performance, but it doesn't feel like a high performance vehicle. It's a Continental with that engine feels nothing like a CTSV. With anything comparable to that.
But the problem I have with Lincoln in particular is, okay, fine, you've de-emphasized the performance. If you want to emphasize your luxury, it's got to be more luxurious. Like it doesn't elevate itself from Ford enough for me. And maybe I'm jaded.
Continental does.
Oh yeah, I haven't.
Navigator does.
I haven't had time in the Continental or the Navigator yet. They should send some to New England so I can talk about them while I drive them.
I'll ask Saeed about that the next time I see him.
Yeah, it would be nice to see them out here because if they want to sell the cars, they should put them in the hands of the people that tell the people about the cars. Yeah. Anyway.
Speaking of which, also at this Jaguar event today, they showed off a couple of cars that are new to North America. And one of those is the XF Sport Brake, the new generation XF Sport Brake, which is in American English is the station wagon. And Joe Eberhard was commenting on this. He said, "We know you journalists love station wagons, just like we love them in Europe. And Joe Eberhard is the CEO of Jaguar Land Rover North America. And he said, now, please go out and tell everybody else, why they should be driving this thing. 'Cause we know you guys will buy these, but
no, we will say that we'll buy them. We won't be able to afford them.
Well, that is that is a slight issue. Yeah. The more affordable station wagons, journalists will happily buy. A $70,000 XF Sport Brake is a little bit more of a challenge. Most journalists can't really afford that on their salary. So they're that until they come up with some more affordable versions of that, which they will have. I mean, they're launching with the XFS, which is the supercharged V6 with I think 360 or 370 horsepower, and then they'll add other powertrains later on. But that's the affordability there is definitely an issue for the journalists.
Yeah, somebody needs to pay journalists better. I mean,
I agree.
Yeah.
That's why neither of us does it full time.
No, I have to feed my family, man. Yeah. That's like, the guys that do it full time, I have a lot of respect for because it's a hustle. And it's difficult. But you actually also had an interview with one of the guys from Jaguar, Dave Larsen. Who's,
Dave is the head of product planning for Jaguar Land Rover North America. So chatted with him for a few minutes. So let's drop that in here. Dave Larsen, you're head of product planning for Jaguar Land Rover North America. Thank you for taking a few minutes with me today. We're here the Jaguar Art Performance Tour, and we just heard some interesting announcements about what Jaguar is launching this year and also where Jaguar is going in the future. It seems like in the last few years, Jaguar has really refocused as a performance-oriented luxury brand. Can you talk a little bit more about what is your overall target for Jaguar in particular before we get into Land Rover a little bit?
All right. So I guess, to frame it up, 2 years ago, we introduced the next generation of Jaguar. And at that point in time, we said we're going to have more competitive products. We're going to have more aggressively priced products. And we're also going to launch Elite Care, which is the best warranty and maintenance coverage in the industry, where we cover the vehicle for 5-year, 60,000 miles for both warranty and maintenance. And we kind of laid out the road work at that point 2 years ago, where if you think the XF was the entry point to the brand, it had a starting price of about $50,000. Today we have the XE and the F-Pace, which really opened the funnel to the brand, and now we have an entry point in the mid-30s. In its first year, the F-Pace has become our number one selling model.
And I think it was probably, maybe 15 years or so ago that there was some first discussion, at least here in North America, about the potential for Jaguar to add an SUV. And I think back in those days, the presumption, when Jaguar was still part of Ford, was that it would be some sort of rebadged Land Rover product. But instead, now that you've actually got the F-Pace and the E-Pace, you've actually gone a completely different direction with SUVs. They're very distinct from what you have with Land Rover. And what's Jaguar trying to achieve? I mean, obviously, SUVs are very popular now in the marketplace, but what are you trying to do distinctive with the Pace lineup for Jaguar?
So, going back to our roots, Jaguar really has an excellent racing heritage, and some of the most notable people in the industry have even called our E-Type the most beautiful car in the world. So racing, styling, that's the Jaguar DNA. And for us to do an SUV, it had to be based on that. And I think the proof point, as you saw through the presentation today, the F-Pace received the Car of the Year award from journalists, and also the Styling award. And again, so that really reinforces the point that, hey, you can do an SUV, be functional, and have fantastic styling, but when you get behind the wheel of this vehicle, the handling and the driving dynamics are a true Jaguar.
I think last week, or perhaps the week before, it was announced that from 2020 onwards, every Jaguar Land Rover product was going to offer an electrified
some form of electrification.
Yep. Is that going to be global, like for every model globally? It'll have an electrified option in the powertrain lineup, or is it going to vary by region?
No. So the statement that we made at Frankfurt was that every all-new product from 2020 forward will have some form of electrification. At the same point, we'll be adding different drive variants to the current products to electrify. And that could be a MHEV,
that being mild hybrid,
plug-in hybrid, and then a full battery electric. So really, with all different factors going on in the world, my point of view is the best powertrain portfolio is a diverse one, and that's where you'll see we offer very fuel efficient 4-cylinder petrol engines. We have 4-cylinder diesel, 6-cylinder diesel, 6-cylinder supercharged, so really a diversified product portfolio. And obviously performance is the focus of Jaguar. We have our supercharged V8 featuring 575 horsepower.
So presumably, since you have such a diverse portfolio, the electrification won't necessarily be on every powertrain option. There'll be some options
form of the electrification.
It'll be available on every model, but not necessarily on every powertrain, or will it be on every powertrain?
So there'll be some form of electrification, whether it's a PHEV, a BEV, or a MHEV in each of the product lines that we offer.
And for the mild hybrids, presumably they're going to be a 48-volt type electrical system? Or?
We haven't disclosed that yet. Okay. The only thing we have mentioned is, for example, on the I-Pace, which will be a BEV only. Yeah. That'll be a 90-kilowatt battery.
Okay, and presumably we'll be seeing some additional battery electric models in the JLR lineup going forward as well?
Yeah, no comment at this point.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
All right. So that was Dave Larsen, head of product planning for Jaguar Land Rover North America. And the Jaguar had several other vehicles that are new to North America on display today, including the XJR 575, which is a very high performance version of the big XJ sedan with 575 horsepower.
But did that have the V8? Are they still making the V8, or was that?
No, this yes, it's a supercharged 5-liter V8. So they have the XJ, the regular XJR with the supercharged V8 is 470 horsepower. So they bumped this one up another 105 horsepower, and it's got 186 mile an hour top speed, 0 to 60 in about 3.5 seconds. So
It's so fast.
It's actually surprisingly affordable, when you compare it to the likes of, an Alpina B7 or an AMG S63. It's only $122,000. So
And I bet it's loaded for that price too.
oh yeah, absolutely. And it's got big red Brembo calipers on it, so you can't go wrong. And then they also brought the XE SV Project 8, which they unveiled a couple of weeks ago in Europe. And this is the high performance XE. The XE is their compact sedan, and the SV Project 8 has an even higher performance version of that 5-liter V8 with 596 horsepower, top speed of over 200 miles an hour, and a price tag of about $188,000, and a big honking wing on the back. And they're only building 300 of them. So, get in line now if you want one of those.
Yeah. None of which we will be able to afford.
Right. And then, for the rest of us, they also brought out the E-Pace, which is the new compact crossover that they launched at the Frankfurt show last week. And this, this is, what they were really highlighting today was the E-Pace, and it's launching at the end of the year with two versions of the 2-liter turbo that their Ingenium 4-cylinder turbo that they have in all their other models now, with 247 horsepower and 296, I think, and a price tag starting in the mid-30s. And it's a pretty cool looking little crossover. And I suspect it's going to do real well for them.
Well, it's the right move for them, and you'd think too with Jaguar that because they're tied up with Land Rover that they would leave all of the crossover and SUV stuff to Land Rover, but there's space for the Jaguar thing in those segments.
Yeah, well, I remember, I think it might have been back in the late 90s or maybe it was the early 2000s when there was first some speculation, and this is when Jaguar and Land Rover were both owned by Ford. And, there was some rumors that Jaguar was going to launch an SUV. And, that they never ended up doing that. But, at the time, the expectation was that it would basically, under Ford's leadership, it would basically just be a rebadged Range Rover, which, really would have been pretty pointless. Why, you already have Range Rover. Why bother rebadging it for, doing another one? But when they finally did get around to doing SUVs, with the F-Pace last year, and now the E-Pace, they decided to go a whole different direction and really, try to make these, real Jaguars, really more performance oriented, sportier looking and sportier feeling than the Land Rovers and Range Rovers. And so that, they're really, these are real, they don't share, well, they, things like the powertrains and that they're sharing with the Land Rover and Range Rover models. But, in terms of the platforms, they're completely different vehicles that share more with the Jaguar cars than they do with the Range Rovers and Land Rovers. And, I think this could work for them.
It appears to be. And they've added content and reduced prices. Jaguar's been making a lot of smart, aggressive moves, so they'll be around. Maybe, maybe the trucks will subsidize the cars that we love, just like say Porsche. So
if they sell enough E-Paces and F-Paces, then they can afford to keep sending us a few XF wagons.
Yeah, I'm down with that, especially for free because we're journalists and they like us.
There you go. We'll tell everybody that's rich enough to afford one to buy one.
Yeah, absolutely. I will drive slowly through the rich areas of town in a Jag wagon. You just have to get it here, and then I live in Massachusetts. There's money in the hills here. Just I will go be your street team.
Yeah. Hey, last week when we were talking about Frankfurt, did we talk about the iPace at all and the race series?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so this is the other thing they talked a little bit about today. Ian Callum, who's the head of design at Jaguar and Land Rover, talked a little bit about the iPace e-Trophy that's launching in 2018, which is going to be a new support series for Formula E. And the iPace is going to be Jaguar's first battery electric vehicle. It's also a crossover, but it's on a completely unique platform. It shares nothing with any of the other Jaguars. And while you might think that the one called the E-Pace, it would be the electric one, it's not. It's actually the I-Pace is the electric one. And I have a feeling that the I-Pace is going to give a real serious challenge to Tesla and the Model X, because frankly, I think it's a lot better looking than the Model X. But also, one of the things that Tesla has done, one of the things that's helped Tesla build their brand is, the performance, but their performance has really been, very limited in its scope. It's basically all just been about straight line acceleration, which is fine. If you spend all your time at the drag strip, but you can only accelerate from 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds so many times.
Like
eventually,
once.
Eventually, you have to change direction,
right?
And that's where the Teslas really start to struggle. Teslas are terrible on the track. Except for drag strips, because the motors and the electronics and the batteries overheat, and then they start degrading the performance pretty dramatically. And so, what Jaguar is doing, they already joined Formula E last year. They're supporting one of the Formula E teams, and starting in 2018, they're going to have the F-Pace e-Trophy or the I-Pace e-Trophy series as a support series for Formula E. And I think when you see these electric SUVs, running around the racetrack, and running consistently fast, lap after lap after lap, that'll really show that these are much more all-around performance electric vehicles rather than just straight line acceleration. And they're really trying to retain the Jaguar character with the I-Pace. And it'll be something distinctly different from what Tesla has to offer.
Well, Tesla, I don't know. I think that they've done a magnificent job of making themselves out to be the premier purveyor of electric vehicles of any form. They've got this whole army of people that's convinced that they can do no wrong and everything they make is brilliant and all other automakers are stupid. I think we're going to quickly start to see that all automakers have caught on to a large degree. And they understand sort of the Tesla magic, but they also understand how to make cars and how to make cars that actually work. The Tesla's biggest problem. Yeah, Tesla's biggest problem, I think, is that they, besides just the huge amount of hubris and arrogance, they try to fix things that don't need to be fixed. I was talking with my neighbor whose brother has a Model S, and he was saying he's never going to buy the X because of the Falcon doors. And I was like, I don't know why companies keep feeling the need to make doors like that. You had the Bricklin, the DeLorean, all the fancy cars have like funny gull wing doors, and they're just like structurally they put a lot of mass in the wrong place, and they're just complicated and failure prone. There's videos out there of like the Falcon doors, just nothing around them, but they're like they won't open because they detect some object because there's sensors and stuff. And it's a cool idea, but like maybe you should get your electric cars working.
It looks really cool on a concept.
Yeah, and it's like it's neat, but in practice, like if you want doors that open with a low profile, just put sliding doors on the thing.
Yeah,
like come on.
I totally agree.
It's a very practical decision.
And with sliding doors, in a rainstorm, the inside of your car doesn't get soaked.
Right, because the Falcon doors take forever.
Yeah,
like that's something that I can't see a major experienced automaker sort of taking a flyer like that and making that kind of mistake. Like they would know better. Like, no, guys, this is going to be a problem. We should just put normal doors on it, or something that isn't this fantastical flying machine. But I don't know. I mean, racing improves the breed, and if it gets us better electric cars, that are better all-arounders, I'm all for it. So
yeah, no, it'll be interesting to watch how that series goes, and then they'll the I-Pace, the production I-Pace will actually be launching before, because the series, the Formula E series is a winter series, so it runs from the fall through the spring, and so it'll be running. I think it starts in September, and then runs through like March or April, and the production I-Pace will actually be available much earlier in the year. It'll be available in the spring, and by the middle of next year, there will actually be two significant all electric competitors to the Model X. In addition to the I-Pace, Audi's going to have their e-tron Quattro launching in the middle of next year, and it'll be interesting to watch those. And then the year after, Porsche is launching the Mission E, the production version of the Mission E, which reports this week indicate is going to be priced pretty much the same as a Panamera, which means it's also going to be priced about the same as a Model S, and have similar range. So, would you rather have a Porsche or a Tesla?
Personally, I think I'd probably rather have the Porsche. I mean, the Mission E is just cool in a lot of ways. So
yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I think it's a much better looking car than the Model S, and I suspect it'll probably be more reliable. Yeah,
I would assume so. Porsche's pretty good at building cars.
Yeah.
All right, well let's jump off again.
Okay. Well, one last thing about today is, as I was driving to and from this Jaguar event, I actually saw a couple of prototype cars, which happens on a fairly regular basis around Southeast Michigan. But one of them was a prototype of the new Jeep Wrangler, which was now almost completely devoid of camouflage. It only had the black and white spotted wrap on it. They took off all the heavy black camo on it, and had to wonder, it's like, why did they even bother with the camo in the first place? Because it looks just like a Jeep Wrangler.
Well, it's good. I mean, it's continuity. People will be happy.
Yeah. And then on the way back from the event, I encountered a prototype of the Hyundai Kona, which is their new subcompact crossover that's going to slot in below the Tucson next year. And that's going to be available with a gas engine, but also as an all-electric version, which is supposed to be Hyundai's first EV with a 200-mile range. So that'll be interesting to see how that one performs with a big battery in it.
The Kona makes me laugh because it's coming to market just in time for the Jeep Cherokee to abandon that kind of design language that they had with the split headlights. Here comes the Kona, and it's not the only Hyundai or Kia that's going to have that kind of front end on it either. So I just think that's an interesting point. I wonder how parallel those designs were, the Jeep and the Hyundai. How much inspiration they took from the Cherokee.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw that, also it occurred to me that they were also taking a little bit of inspiration from the Nissan Juke, which I mean, it's the orientation of its lights is quite a bit different, but it also has this kind of dual lighting configuration with the one set of lights high up on the front end and on the fenders, stretching back on the fenders, and then the other lights down below on the lower down on the fascia.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think so much of the Juke. I think that kind of thing is interesting. We need that kind of stuff to push convention a little bit. So because you've got the Wrangler, which looks like a Wrangler, right? So now you've got the Kona that looks like nothing else. So
that's right.
You saw both ends of the spectrum in one day.
And speaking of the other end of the Hyundai spectrum, the chief of Genesis had some interesting comments this week.
I love. I mean, I can't tell you how much I love these comments. So it was Hyundai and Genesis head of vehicle test and high performance, Albert Biermann, and he basically just said the technology that's in cars from BMW and Mercedes are all marketing, and he called them stupid, and basically said Genesis, we're not really offering that. We've got adjustable shocks, but beyond that, no super fancy performance technology that's going to break. You're not going to find any air suspension, no active roll bars and stuff like that. Just a solid platform tuned well. And I can't argue with that because the last Genesis models I drove were as such. They were good. Well done.
Yeah, just, very, very, very well executed fundamentals.
Yeah. It seems to have helped that they talked to Lotus for development of the, I guess it's the G80 now, but it was just the Genesis when they brought out this generation of the Genesis.
Yeah, the second generation Genesis sedan, which became the G80.
Yeah, and it really made a difference. They're serious, and it shows. You just look around the car, and you see solid fundamental engineering from it's got cast aluminum front strut towers and stuff. Those are serious pieces, and they've reduced parts count for higher rigidity and lower weight, and just all of those things that you would expect from a manufacturer like BMW or Mercedes that's intent on building something that's that high performance. And it's the same stuff. You open the hood of a Jaguar. We were just talking about Jaguar. That's the same kind of thing you're going to see under the hood of a Jaguar is that kind of structure. So they're not fooling around.
Yeah, and Biermann was speaking. He was making these comments at the launch in Korea of the new G70, which is their smaller sedan, which is aimed directly at the heart of the compact premium sedan market with the 3 Series and the Audi A4 and the Mercedes C-Class. And from initial impressions, been hearing from people, it sounds like it's really good.
Yeah, what do you think its chances are? Genesis is still kind of a non-entity.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough to launch a new brand from scratch. I think most people have no idea what Genesis is. You certainly still don't see at least around here, you don't see very many of them on the road. So it'll be interesting to see how it does. I don't know. I have no idea how it's going to do. It's tough. It's going to be tough launching, a third sedan, into the market at this point in time when everybody's going to utilities. I think, it'll probably do okay, but I don't think it's going to be a huge seller. I think, the one to watch is going to be when they start bringing out their SUVs under the Genesis brand next year.
Yeah, well, that's what my initial thought was. Okay, the car is good. That pleases me, but they clearly don't exist to please Dan. They really do need to bring out utilities.
They really need to rethink that.
Yeah, they should get on it. For a long time, I thought I was just gonna, when I was in elementary school, I was I gotta make my own car company. Let's see how far that got me. There's notebooks full of little designs that I think are still very interesting to look at. But yeah, the sedan it's kind of like a conversation piece, I suppose. And I think it's a way for them to build their credibility. It's going to be maybe a tool for them to say, we're the brand that took on the E-Class or the 3 Series, and look at how well we did. Because the cars are good and they know it, and they know that they do stack up in a lot of ways against those firmly established European competitors. So if the G70 is, maybe sharper than the 3 Series, a better value, and, just as well made, and I expect it to be all of those things, it's going to garner a lot of enthusiastic press coverage. Beyond that, though, they really need to put utilities in the showroom. They need something in the small and mid-sized crossover segment. And I think that'll be the key.
They showed a concept this year at the New York show, which we'll see probably a production version of next year. And I think we'll see a couple more utilities from them before 2020. So over the next 2 to 3 years, we'll probably see at least 2 or 3 more utilities.
Yeah. See, so while I'm going to run the company by proxy and say, get on it, guys, get some utilities out there, and build me a supercar while you're at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we had one message question come in on Facebook this evening from Jeff Donsback saying, what can be done to get people to put down their phones while driving? I saw so many idiots on my commute today not paying attention, slowing down the traffic flow. Makes my blood boil.
Yeah, Jeff and I share some of the commute, I think. So if it was me, I'm sorry. I mean, you could wrap the whole car in foil, which would block the cell signals. I really like the, was it Nissan that had the little sort of RF blocking compartment where you stick your phone?
Yeah. I think it was Nissan that did that. The thing is, you can put a little, Faraday cage, where you stick your phone in the car, and you can do all this stuff, but it all comes down to, are people actually going to use it? If people don't stick their phone in there, what's the point? I don't know. I don't know that there, until we get autonomous cars, I don't know that there is anything that we can do about this problem.
Yeah, autonomous cars are just going to give people an excuse to, disconnect. It was interesting. I was listening to the Autonocast, and they just did an interview. I think it's episode 24, where they were talking about 2 different styles of autonomy, right? Sort of like series autonomy and parallel autonomy, and everything that they're talking about with cars is, I think, parallel autonomy, right? So it's basically like the car drives and you ignore things, versus like a more aeronautic approach where the human is there and engaged, even though there's automated systems. The person is there and paying attention and dialed in. That's expected from highly trained people like pilots, until we treat drivers like sort of with that level of importance on the skill. I don't think you're going to see that kind of desire or behavior to pay attention. It's just not there. So
even before we had cell phones in cars, it was hard enough to get drivers to pay attention. Humans just we're just not very good at, most of us are just not very good at this task.
Well, it gets repetitive. And I mean, that's why that's why you take chances, right? That's why you start to drive faster, and because you're trying to make it interesting for yourself, which is a completely crappy excuse, but it's true to a certain degree. You're trying to entertain yourself, because otherwise it's dull. And that's, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the things that, like, I actively force myself to ignore the phone, especially in stop and go, especially with the cars that have cruise control systems that will follow traffic. If I've got a mile of stop and go, I could very easily set the cruise and just have it grind through that while I surf the web. Not a problem.
Yeah, that next week is going to be interesting for me, because I'm going to be, for a couple of days, I'm going to be driving the Cadillac CT6 with Super Cruise, doing a road trip, a 2-day road trip from Cleveland to Chicago to Memphis. And, this is the first semi-automated system, a level 2 system that is designed for actual hands-off the wheel operation. And it'll be interesting to see, what it feels like to do that for an extended period of time, and to see because with that system, you're still eyes on and you still have to stay engaged. And there's a driver monitoring system that if you appear to not be paying attention to the road, it will, start alerting you with increasing aggression. And eventually, if you don't respond, it'll bring the car to a stop. And I'll be curious to see how I feel after driving that for a few hours.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see, did it make you angry? Did you actually love it? What the flip side of it is. I think another key, I don't know if there's really any good solution to keeping people off of their devices. It's just, we use the devices for things that have turned us all into dopamine addicts, because you get that little hit of thrill that, somebody liked your Facebook post or whatever. So that's one problem. Just the way we use those things, it's a gratification thing. It's really hard to curb that once that sort of becomes your behavior. Just look around your office and see people doing it at their desks at work and stuff. You could make more incentive to telecommute. So you're trying to get cars off the road so that the roads are clearer. But I have a feeling that if you clear one group of cars off the road, you're going to kind of replace it with another group. It's the more lanes you make for traffic, the more traffic expands to fill them. You're never ahead of the curve. That is quite a chicken or an egg problem. And I feel like we haven't given an adequate answer, but nobody else seems to have one either.
No. And we almost managed to get through the show without talking about autonomous cars for once.
Almost. You could take the train. You could, especially here, you could take the train.
Yeah. Depending where you live, that is an excellent solution. You're free to use your phone there.
Yeah. It's probably terrible. Because the problem is it's really tricky to take the train from suburb to suburb in a lot of places, and this is one of those places because there's a few commuter rail lines, but you can't go from line to line without going all the way into the city, coming back out. So good luck with that. That kind of sucks. But if you work in the city, you're have at it, man. Take the train. I would love a job where I could take the train. Because I could actually get to work if I took the commuter rail and a combination of the Green Line in Boston. It would take me so long, and it would be so expensive every day. Public transportation could improve, and that's the thing. The ride sharing bros, they're trying to do that. It's everybody, you can Uber pool and you could all meet at the same place and take the same vehicle. It's great. That's a bus.
Yeah. It could be, micro transit, depending on, where you live now, you have options using stuff like Chariot, which is, kind of, partway in between, ride hailing and a bus, 15 passenger van, but you use an app to reserve your seat and pay for your seat on there. So you always know you have a seat when the van gets there. Exactly what it's going to cost you. You have more routes, going to more places than buses typically serve. So, there's a bunch of different alternatives, and, going forward, there's going to be more and more different varieties of these services that you can try out as well.
Yeah, and I wonder if that becomes an incentive for employers too. They'll validate parking and they'll pay for your public transit and stuff too. If they offer a system like that too, because it almost ensures, or it helps to encourage, a worker to be in the office, and you're removing one of those barriers, right? We'll provide transportation.
Actually, for Chariot, I spoke with, I think back in about our third or fourth episode, I did an interview. We had an interview with Ali Vahabzadeh, the CEO and founder of Chariot, and I spoke with him again about a month ago. Half of their business now is, enterprise, working with companies, so, rather than just individuals, using the app, to get a ride. They're actually, they have companies contracting them, to set up routes for their employees, so that, and they're paying for it, so the employees don't even have to pay for the rides, and they drop them off directly at their workplace, and that way, the employers don't have to deal with having parking, don't have to have as much parking available for their employees. They know, that they're going to arrive, more or less on time, and people aren't going to be having to struggle to find parking, especially in urban places, places like New York or San Francisco. So employers are increasingly taking advantage of these types of services for their workers.
Yeah. See, I mean, somebody already had an idea I just had. So there we go. I would not survive in that industry. I'm not forward thinking enough. So yeah, there you go.
All right.
Or you could work from home, Jeff. Work from home.
Yeah, that's what I do. Works for me.
From home. I could work from home a little bit, and then eventually they'd be like, "We need to see you in the office. You must come in." So all right, that's podcast 39. I think we've done it. We didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about the Mercedes EVs in Alabama and their EQ thing, but that leaves it for next time.
Yep.
So yeah, throw us some questions. I will dig up some more of the old voicemails for next time as well, because those were entertaining. And yeah, we will see you guys again with episode 40.
All right. See you next time.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say, ahoy, or land ho, and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.